Hey there, welcome to our podcast. This is Jodi and Leah. We're super excited to have you join us on this amazing journey of self-discovery and spiritual awakening. Each episode that we do is all about creating a warm and welcoming space where we dive into big topics like soul growth and healing together. We believe that even tough times like trauma and struggles can lead to powerful changes in our lives. And so we're going to chat about all sorts of ideas that connect with your spiritual path, sharing insights that encourage you to grow and understand yourself better. Plus, we have a fantastic lineup of guests who bring their own unique stories and wisdom to the table, making our conversations even richer. So take a deep breath, open your heart, and come along for the ride. Let's jump in and start this enlightening adventure together. Tune in and enjoy the journey.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our second episode of Collective Soulversations. This is Leah Exidia from Cosmic Heart Intuitive Services, and I'm here with my beautiful soul sister, Jodi Jones. Say
Hey,
hello, Jodi.
everybody. Welcome to episode number 2.
Welcome to episode number 2. Thank you so much to all of the people who reached out to me and gave us feedback. It was so warm and so wonderful. And I know there's a lot of people that are actually waiting for this second episode. So I think it's great to get started.
Yeah, the feedback was awesome, right? There were so many messages that came through, like heartfelt, like, thank you guys for doing this. I related to everything you were saying. Even my husband listened to it and he was like, that's, you guys are going to reach a lot of people, help a lot of people. And I was like, yeah, that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
exactly the purpose of what we're doing, right?
And I love the fact that he gave you that feedback because I like his feedback when he gives us feedback. It's very
Yeah, and I
kind of
mean, and
straight
he
to
is
the
a bit
point.
of a
So thank you,
podcast
Tom.
connoisseur because he does
Right?
listen to a lot of podcasts. So he does have
Perfect.
something to compare it to. Yes,
And
awesome.
yeah, so that's great. I love to hear that. So
Yeah,
we did start talking before we even started
I
recording
know.
today. So we'll talk about how you're feeling. You started saying about the energies feeling kind of wonky.
Yeah, and it's funny. This is how, like, you should really trust your intuition. This is kind of how intuition works. So as I was getting ready for Lee and I to connect today, I was like, it's for me. I don't know if anybody else is kind of like this, probably not, but I've always have my spirit team in there, like, having this conversation with me, sending me, like, pointers and guidance and notes. And so I'm listening, and they were like, just start recording right away. Don't have your little chat and your catch up and everything before you record. Just start your show right away. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that makes sense. Makes total sense. And then Leah and I get on, and what do? We just start talking right away. And then we're like, okay, so let's stop talking. Let's stop talking because, like, all this stuff needs to be recorded, needs to be on the podcast. So that's what we're doing. And we did start talking though, because Leah said to me, so how you feeling today?
Yeah, I always check in with you around that because, you've got such a pulse on the collective energy and as well as the incoming solar stuff. And so you've kind of, unfortunately for you, but great for me, you're kind of like a
Kind of like a
barometer.
spiritual weather vane, right?
Right? Exactly. So you're my barometer. So you said, I'm feeling good, and then something comes in, and I realized as you were saying that, oh my goodness, that's what's been happening to me, like emotionally today.
Yeah.
And my own team talks to me all the time too, so I
Right.
get
Right.
that, and
Yeah.
and they talk to me a lot about a lot of what I do is helping people with their emotional healing and things like that. So they're always talking to me about that. And the other day when I was asking about ascension symptoms for something, and they kind of said like, duh, it comes in through your emotions, Leah, like, hello. Um, so I realized when you were talking that, yeah, it's been emotionally up and down for me, but for no particular reason. Like what I'm realizing is my I'm kind of a barometer for the emotional collective. And so
Right.
I get hit with these waves of sadness or this or that. And as long as I don't let my ego like attach to it and say, ooh, why am I sad? oh, I'm
Right.
sad because of this. And then I'm like living out this story that really wasn't even in my head in the first place. So that, observer detachment, that's been a big learning journey for me.
Yeah, and definitely like the whole mind thing for me, right? Like our minds can become very, very powerful. They can be,
Yes.
our best ally, but they can also become our worst enemy sometimes. And I know, there's so many layers to what I know for what I feel. And I think it's like they just keep on adding these like being an empath, there's so many things that we're
Hmm.
sensitive to, right? We're first of all, we are just sensitive beings ourselves. Then we are sensitive beings to our family, in our immediate environment. We can be sensitive to our pets, we have that.
Absolutely. Hmm.
And then how about our town and how about, our province, our country, our our planet,
The
right?
planet,
All
right?
of it. Yeah. So there's so many, and the thing that I try, and trust me, I'm still working on this because it's, a daily um, life lesson, is that when these kind of like energy waves come in, where, and I was saying to Leah, it's like definitely like I've been having a few days in a row where there's a lot of emotional energy coming through. And so, and I talked about this in the video I posted today on my pages, but just how so many of us have been having really dark dreams at night for the last little while, like very disturbing dreams. And then Spirit gave me some insight into why, and of course, you touched on that, Leah. But it's like the emotions. The emotions need to come through. We need to feel the emotions.
Mhm.
It's all about the emotional stuff, right?
Yes. Yeah. And that's one of the things that that's my healing journey has been all about that, right? The physical stuff was starting to heal through the emotional healing. So that has been my whole journey, is the emotional stuff.
Yeah,
But it took me all of this time to go, oh, I'm a barometer for the emotional collective. And so now I'm understanding myself more, right?
yeah.
Through our conversations and through, but my team talks to me a lot, and they just brought it in now, is we have to be really clear, or at least I had to be really clear, that I am a multidimensional being, right? And
Hmm.
so the healing, I can't just say, oh, it's the solar energy and it's the collective energy, right? And then just leave
Right,
it there. I
right,
also have to be aware of my own emotional body, my own mental body, my own physical body, right? My
right.
own energetic body, and be really in tune with all of that, because it all needs to heal at the same time.
Yeah. And so let me ask you this though. So I know that you consider yourself to be an empath, as do I.
Definitely. Yep.
And so I feel like we are born like that. So we're born highly sensitive beings, right?
Hmm.
And I do also feel like so we feel things so significantly, but I feel like the majority of the time throughout our lifetime, it's being like, why are you so sensitive? Like, why are you getting emotional
Absolutely.
about? Like,
Absolutely.
right? Why are you overreacting to that?
Right. And so
Right?
there's a bit of there's like gaslighting in that, don't you feel? Like there's a
Oh,
little
yeah.
bit of gaslighting in that, but not intentional, right? There has been
But
this
who
real,
even knew what gaslighting was? I didn't know
even
what
back then.
gaslighting was. I honestly thought, "No, there's something wrong with me. Like, why am
Mm.
I feeling stuff clearly that the people around me are not?"
Right. But until you understood yourself, I'm assuming in whatever way, whether as a medium, a psychic, an empath, until you understood that part of yourself, you would have continued to think that, oh, there's something wrong with me for feeling this
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I know that my journey's been about is, yes, I'm an empath. Yes, I feel so much of everybody else's stuff, but I've also understood that I also had a lot of my own emotional stuff to heal. So there was a big
Mhm.
difference between I'm triggered and I'm having an emotional reaction because something's unhealed,
Right.
versus, oh no, I'm having a normal reaction. You're just gaslighting me.
Yeah, and
So
well, in Spirit's saying too scapegoat because they,
yeah.
and I've seen this, right? There's, And this is why I know there are a lot of people that like don't like to use the word empath. They don't want to, um there was I can't remember who it was right now, but it was a big famous medium, and he like did this post where he was like really, really like making empaths seem like they were just ridiculous. And he was like, I don't even use that word. And if you're using that word, you're disempowering yourself and yada, yada, yada.
Actually feel like there's nothing more powerful than a healing empath.
Right. When you are working on it though, that's
Yes.
the difference. So
Yes, exactly.
when you are somebody who uses your empath diagnosis, we'll call
Yeah.
as a like, a scapegoat as to like buy like easily doing I've seen this with lots of people where, oh, it's the room I'm feeling. Oh, it's your stuff I'm feeling. Oh, I'm picking up
That and
on.
that does. It allows you to bypass the truth, right? Of
Right.
what you have to be healing.
And the thing we always have to remember is that there is a very strong field of frequency called resonance. And so everything that we're feeling is because we carry that frequency within us. So it's never
Mhm.
just, oh, it's just the collective energy. Oh, it's just her problem. Oh, it's just his problem. No, you're feeling this because it is literally matching up with the frequencies you are carrying,
Exactly. That's
right?
exactly. And that goes for when people start talking about, relate the kinds of relationships they have or their friends or whatever. It's all a vibrational match.
Exactly.
And until you're ready to actually do the deep dive and understand that if I'm feeling the sadness of the collective,
Right.
there is a sadness within me. And I can decide how I want to deal with that. But
Yeah,
most
absolutely.
people don't see like that there's that disconnection in understanding. So Spirit is just reminding me about not everybody will have a full understanding of what an empath is. So we're talking about the concept here. And so they're also reminding me that everything's really unique. So there's an individual understanding. So for you, what would like if somebody looked at you and you're like, I'm an empath because what would be
Mhm.
like three things?
I am an empath because I am highly sensory, would
Excellent.
be
So
one
what
of
does
the things.
sensory mean? Like the smell, the feel, the
Yeah,
taste,
so
the
I
sixth
feel it, I
sense,
sense
obviously.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of that. Um, and I would consider myself an empath because I have a great ability to step into other people's shoes. So I can instantly. It's funny because my kids used to joke and say, "Oh, she's doing the body morphing." But it would, I didn't even understand this when I was younger, that I would just do this and not have the realization that I was doing it. I do it now because it's not something you want to do. You don't want to step into everybody's shoes all the time.
Mm-mm.
Um, but yeah, I have that ability to step into like literally somebody's energy and pick up like what they're feeling. Like, you know what I mean? Like I can instantly feel all their stuff. And then I also believe that I'm an empath because vibrationally, energetically, I can feel that my template is different from most people. That's the that's the truth of it. It's always like this,
Right.
like, it's the black sheep syndrome. It's like that, being even when you're around a bunch of people that you really like, there's always this kind of like, well, I'm kind of different than you guys. I feel different.
Mhm.
Like I don't feel like I fit in exactly. I feel like I want to. I feel like
Right.
I
Right.
want to be one of the cool kids, but it just doesn't always I don't always have the ability to do it. And
And
so what about you? What do you think qualifies you to be an empath?
um well, I think I'm an empath because the depth and breadth of emotions that I can sense in other people is very, very strong.
Yeah.
Um and by doing that, I'm able to almost understand what it is that they need in the moment on a
Right?
very intuitive level. I think I'm an empath because I too have never fit in, but not fitting in has caused me a lot of hurt over the years. And
Mhm.
so I had to really um, understand that I do feel different vibrationally. It's just I am a different being from a lot of other people, but in the same time, that first thing that I can feel other emotions and things like that allows me to connect so deeply with people, right?
Right.
So there's those two things, and then I think the third thing, I know this sound, I think I've mentioned it before. There is just this deep understanding of compassion.
Right. Right.
Judgment for me feels very uncomfortable. And I'm not saying I don't judge because I'm still human, right?
Right. Right.
But the
Right.
vibration of judgment when it comes in whatever way, my thoughts, my feelings, watching it in someone else, it automatically feels uncomfortable. So
Mhm.
that default to compassion for people, animals, plants, the planet, like all of that big heartedness, I think is an empath thing for me.
Yeah, and so did you when you were younger, because I think about, like, when I was in elementary school, high school, when you're being most social, I was always really aware of the underdogs, and I was always there to stand up for them, and even it's interesting because for again, we talked about this before where I've gone as an introvert and an extrovert back and forth throughout my life. When I was
Mhm.
in school, I was very much an extrovert, and I'm not gonna, sound egoic, but I was one of the popular kids. I had lots of friends, was doing hanging out with the cool kids doing that stuff. And I always, though, would be like, if there was somebody that, they were making fun of or they like were not
Right.
allowing them, I was always like, no way, like that, because they were some of the best people. And I could easily see that people were just missing the goodness in them.
Right.
Right.
Right. Absolutely. I can see you. That's absolutely that whole. But the flip side to that is that you also learn the hard way that not everybody is the way you perceive them. Right. And that's just because we have to learn those lessons of discernment as we move
I
along
was
the
just going
journey.
to say that. I was just going to say that, I always have that, like, the benefit of the doubt for
Yes.
everybody,
Hmm.
right? Always seeing like the goodness in everybody, which
Always.
doesn't always exist in the way that we need it. So yes, we do. We
Yeah,
definitely
and I
need it.
don't think that it's because that goodness isn't there. And
Right.
Spirit just reminded me of this. It's not that the goodness that we're seeing in these people isn't there. It is there, but we have to learn the hard way that there are other things within that person that we have to sort of step back from, right? So
Exactly.
it's not that we were wrong in a sense, but rather we, I guess, trusted maybe a little too easily.
Yeah, we used the empath vision a little bit too much.
Yes. Yeah. So that and so those yeah. So I'm wondering how many of our listeners hear a little bit of themselves and when we identify why we believe we're empaths because I'm not a big let me go online and read about this stuff
Right.
anymore. I was at the beginning and you have to. I mean there is a part of your journey where you're seeking so much spiritual information, right?
Hmm.
But now at this point, because like you, we channel the information. I kind of do it backwards. I get the information and then I'm like, okay, let me go and see if there's something out there that aligns with what this
Right.
is.
Get some validation and make sure your spirit team is like actually doing their jobs.
Exactly. Right. And I'm not just making this stuff
Yeah,
up.
we're not just
Like,
crazy, we're not having hallucinations, we actually
and so that's one of the things I've realized is that the vibration of an empath, when I have somebody sitting in front of me and I'm doing like a reading or I'm doing an energy healing, as soon as you're sitting in front of an empath, that vibration is there. So it is a
Mhm.
resonance thing. So if you're feeling like you're a little different, it may not be because it's a bad thing.
Right. Absolutely. And so let me ask you this, because and it's something that I mean, it's been a theme in this incarnation for me, probably many, but this one for sure. And I also recognize it in other empaths as well, and in, many clients when I do the readings or the healings and that as well, is that we tend to hold a lot of fear in our vibration. And so
Mm.
spirit was just showing me, like, talk about the word anxiety because
Yes.
I
Yes.
feel like that's such a big misunderstood
Mm,
frequency, and especially for empaths, and especially if you're somebody like myself who's very sensory, so like picking up things in your physical body and having physical sensations, it's very easy to go into that frequency around it, right? The fear frequency that we
yeah.
call it anxiety, right?
Yeah. And I suffered from that label and still have a lot of anxiety that comes through. And I'm not as sensory as you are. A lot of what comes through for me comes through my heart chakra. So when there's a lot of anxiety, it's the heart palpitations, right? And the all the energy that builds in your throat, and
Right.
to be able to just remove myself and say it's just a vibration, you just need to
Mhm.
breathe through it, it's very hard, because it for me it reminds me of a lot of things that I felt when I was younger, or things that I've been through. So again, I don't I have to be really careful not to let my mind put a story to what's just a vibration moving through my body.
Exactly. And then it takes a long time to learn that, because I can honestly say that there's still moments, like still moments on every day where I will get that sensory overload, and I know I recognize it. I recognize that
Hmm.
it's fear. I recognize that it's anxiety. And my mind will try to grab it, right? My mind will try to grab onto it.
Why am I feeling like this? What,
Yeah.
right?
Why is this
Yeah.
causing? What's it from? Where
What?
does
Yeah.
that, all of that. And so I'm glad kind of spirit took us around the circle to this, because so what we were going to do today, because one of the things, and just to let you guys know, we have some really awesome guests coming. We've got our
Yes.
schedules starting to fill up. We're bringing in
Almost
some,
right to the new year, it looks like. Isn't that
yeah, like
awesome?
some,
Like,
I can't wait
fantastic. Yeah.
until we get to bring these people in and have conversations with them. And one of the things that we wanted to do with this podcast is we wanted to have an exploration of everybody's experiences, but in the moments where they were like in their deepest, darkest, right? Like
Hmm.
the, you know, so full of anxiety, so full of whatever depression, whatever the, your battles have been, and then to share with us, like, this is what I did to come out of it. This is how, these are some of the things that I used that worked for me, that helped to save my soul.
Yes. Yeah. Uh, Um, and I wanted us to share our own moments before we asked our guests to come on and
Right.
share their moments, because I think that's only fair. Um, and we talked about this, that it's not just, oh, the moment. This is the moment. It's, oh, which moment am I choosing?
Right. Right.
Right?
Right.
And the few guests that I asked to come on, they all said the same thing. Oh gosh, I got to start thinking about which moment I'm choosing. So
Right.
it's nice to know that, we're all kind of in this together. I always call it my moments where my tears and my knees hit the floor at the same time. Like,
Right.
I was just like, God, I have nowhere else to go now. Those moments have been like, there's been a few. I'd say there's been two or three in my life, and getting out of this last one, um, hardest but best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because when you're talking, spirit just keeps saying soul saving moments. So I've never
Yeah.
heard them say that before, but I guess that's kind of what we do, right? Like it completely separates us to the point where we need to save our souls.
And for me at least, there was nowhere else to turn but God, spirit, whatever
Right.
source, whatever it is, that term you want to use. I will use God regularly throughout the podcast, and that's just not religious in any way. It's just the term that I use for that ever loving creator source.
Right.
Um,
Yes.
but those are those dark moments where all the other ways just aren't working. Like, this is it.
No, I know. And one thing I've found too is it's interesting because I can do like my most recent moments, and no,
Mhm.
like, those were obviously my biggest. There's obviously been a build up to experience, to build the complete collapse, to
Right,
that
yeah.
part of it. But I've also done it because I have a very, very, mind that needs to, like, know the why of it. Like, why? What was the
Mhm.
purpose? How did that
Mhm.
happen? Why? And so I've sat there, like, often, and gone back over, like, the episodes of these, like, life-shattering moments, right? And for a long time, I couldn't even piece them together. Like, they just seemed random. Like, they was like, okay, well, that happened when, and then that happened. But now I'm having, like, I can see, like, these threads connecting all of these experiences to being, like, as Spirit's just saying, one and the same. They're, like, literally one and the
Patterns and
same.
cycles. Patterns and cycles. That's my you just described what my last 3 years of healing has been for me.
Yeah.
I've had so many of these moments that were, thank you for in, either we call them soul shattering or soul saving, and definitely soul saving in the past 5 years, like, just, oh gosh, but they floated for me in my consciousness for my whole life. They were just
Mhm.
like these little snapshots of things that had happened to me
Right.
until I had the massive physical breakdown and my body said, okay, no more.
Right.
And then I had a fantastic therapist who helped me start piecing these things and processing them together. And what I loved about her was I said very clearly to her at the beginning, I don't believe in like the whole psychiatric, medical, like all of
Mhm.
that. I need somebody who understands how to process traumas,
Right.
right? How
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
process heartache.
Yeah.
And she says that we start by holding space. And I'm
Right.
just like, okay, I love you.
Mm.
So
I love that
she,
that happened for you. I love so
yeah.
much that that happened. Like that,
And that's
obviously
not
that earth
everyone's
angel.
experience at
Yeah.
all. Like,
Yeah.
and so when I say like, and for me, I've had the right people put on my path because I listen to my team, right?
Right.
Every time they nudge me through my intuition or through a synchronicity or through a sign, I like, I listened, and
Right.
it's been miraculous. So
So
she's
you can tell that Leah is definitely the A student, and I'm
no,
definitely the
because we haven't
C
even
student.
began to talk about my physical health. And the kinds of foods I eat and how, so when we flip the story, Jodi, you shall become the A student.
Isn't it's all about balance, right? It's all about keeping things
Exactly.
in balance. But I love that, when Leah talks about her therapist, and obviously the therapist knew exactly what she needed and gave her all of that space, and that she was following her intuition. And I guess for me, I feel I feel like it's just been this continual, loop back into the same kind of cycles and experiences. And so
Mhm.
clearly there's been, many moments where I'm not trusting my intuition. I'm not trusting my guides. And I don't know about you if you've had this experience, but there's been times where my guides have just gone silent on me.
Absolutely. Yes. And then you panic,
Right.
right?
Right.
Definitely. And when
Yeah.
that happens, I now have learned it's because I'm in this space, almost like they're showing me like a seed. You know, when a seed is planted in the dark and it
Hmm.
hasn't started germinating yet, and it hasn't started, getting the sunlight and nothing, it's just in there and it's
Right.
just sitting.
Right.
That there's purpose in that. They're just
Yes.
showing me there's purpose in that. And so now I'm starting to understand that when they go silent, I'm just meant to sit and just whatever's going on, I'm meant to
Right.
sit with it.
Yeah. And
But
it's
let's
literally when we talk about frequency, everything holding a frequency, it's literally just a matter of wavelength. And
mhm.
it's funny because I get all of, these understandings when I have clients, when I do readings, teachings, all of that, but I don't always remember to apply them to myself. So
Absolutely.
right? But I know for a fact that, for all of the years of doing mediumship readings where I would bring, people's loved ones who have passed, somebody who was married for 40, 50 years and all of a sudden their loved one passes and then they don't feel them at all. They like aren't getting
Mhm.
any signs or any communication and they feel heartbroken and worried because they think that something's wrong with their loved one in spirit. And spirit would always show me that it's just a matter of frequency. So when we drop in frequency through, grief, sadness, loneliness, heartbreak, whatever it is, we are lower in frequency than the spirit world.
Mhm.
So it's a matter of, we're on a different channel. So we're on a lower channel, they're on a higher channel. And when we're in that vibrational frequency, we just cannot connect. You have to raise your frequency, right? Which makes logical sense, right?
Makes
If you're
logical sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's why when we are going through some of our darkest moments where, felt like the team was just gone, it was because our frequency had dropped so low, right? We were just at a point where our vibrational frequency just was below the meeting point.
Absolutely. No, that's like already talked about once in this podcast. Vibrational frequency is like match in, match, like what you put in comes out, right? It's a match for a match.
Yeah.
But for me, when I know that for the longest time when I was in those places of the seed in the darkness, I would be like, okay, I'm going to try this. Okay, I'm going to try that. Okay, I'm
Right.
going to raise my frequency. I'm going to try this. Okay, I'm going to try that. And that never worked for me. It felt false. So what
Right. Right.
I've learned, and for me, what works for me is just to be still. And then eventually I will find my way out of it. And then
That's really good advice. That's really good
the
advice.
right thing that I need will come to me.
Instead of
Um,
chasing it, right? Which is
instead of chasing
resistance.
it. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's been so hard because when you got to just sit still in that dark spot,
Right. Yeah.
ooh,
Yeah.
you got to
Just me,
think
myself, and I. Yeah.
exactly. But it's all part of that learning, and they've never let me down yet, ever
Right.
let me down yet,
Right. Even though
right?
it sometimes feels like it when you're
Yes.
sitting in your own pile of shit and it's
Oh,
like
yes. When, like I said, when you're
little bit of
healing
help
your
here, folks.
but
Yeah.
there's also something to be learned in not hearing them, right? There's
Yes.
something to be learned in those times as well, because there are lessons. And if they're always there giving us the information, then
Mhm.
we're not the one learning the lesson. So
Right.
it's
Because at the
all
core, we're
part of that.
explorers, right? We come
Exactly. I
here to
love that.
explore everything.
I love that. At
Yeah.
the core,
And
we are explorers.
absolutely. And so if I think back on kind of like one of my back on my line of, deepest, darkest moments, I can now recognize that so much of it had to do with frequency. And maybe you can offer some insight or guidance into this, but it's interesting because it was in a very, of course, stressful time in my life because do not underestimate the power of stress.
Oh my
It
gosh, yes.
it is incredibly powerful because it's actually like multiple frequencies all combined
Right.
that create this what we call stress. I was in a really bad marriage. Got married when I was really young because everybody else was getting married, and you should get married when you're young and
Yeah.
have babies, right? Luckily didn't have any babies with that marriage. So, a divine timing on everything. But I had that. I was working a job that was very, very stressful. I was in a supervisor position. It was on a lot of hours, night shifts, yada yada. It was also a time in my life where I was smoking a lot of weed to
Mm-hmm.
get through uh, you know, to distract myself from the
Man.
stressors that I had. I was also, drinking on the weekend. It was a party time. I mean, I was young, but I was not eating. I don't know if I was even eating fruits and vegetables. It was that
What were
bad.
those?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was eating whatever I wanted to eat. I literally would start my day with a cup of coffee and a cigarette. As I was
Yes.
getting ready for work, that would be my day. Those would be the frequencies I would put into my body, would be nicotine and caffeine, which, I look at now and I think if I started my day like that, I would probably just explode because
What happened to Jody?
right? Like I can't even drink green tea now because of
No.
I'm so sensitive to the caffeine. But yes, it's how we change, right? How we morph and change. And so that was kind of like my experience. Like it was a lot of like unsettled, a lot of like disconnect from the body, not honoring who I was, how
Mm.
none of that.
Yep.
And so here's and I'm not making this up. I'm not exaggerating at all. There was a night where I was laying on the sofa and I was watching a movie with my husband at the time. And all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, because that's how things like to show up for me, I had this like crazy amount of energy. And just to like also say about this, I was not necessarily spiritual then. I've always been a spiritual person, but I was not reading the books and I was not taking the classes and I was obviously was not doing any of that stuff. But I've always been, because of course who I am, always knew that there was like something bigger out there. Didn't
Mhm,
understand
mhm.
it, but knew it was there. And so all of a sudden I had this crazy amount of energy like flooding my whole entire body, like just out of nowhere, like if somebody plugged me into, the wall and an electric current started flowing from the base of my spine all the way up into my head and just kept cycling like this. And so I like literally jumped up and was like, what the fuck is this? Right? Immediately went to, like, the patio to open up to get some fresh air, thinking, like, "Okay, like, am I dying? Am I having a stroke? Am I having a heart attack?" I
Mhm.
stood there at that window breathing in the fresh air as this energy just kept on and when I think about it now, like, it was so powerful, like, it was almost like if I could describe it, it probably had, like, blues to it and silvers and sparkles, and it was like this just train of energy just going from the base up, back around, and it did this for about half an hour, and I was terrified.
Right. Well,
I
I
was
would
like, "What the
understand.
hell?" And then I went into, "Okay, Jody, you've just been working too much. You've been neglecting your body. Go have a nice relaxing bath. You hadn't had a nice soak in a tub for a while. Go and do that." So the energy stopped, but I was definitely feeling like a train wreck. Like I was feeling like, "What the hell was that?" I went and I had a nice bath thinking, okay, I'm going to relax. I know the baths make me feel relaxed. I did that. I put my pajamas on and I climbed into bed. And I'm not even exaggerating. I laid there and I prayed for about 6 hours.
There you go. Yeah.
Like I didn't know what it was about. I didn't understand it, and at that time, my prayers were pretty simple. I think I just kept on saying the Lord's Prayer over
Yeah.
and over and over and over again. And the next day, of course, I went to my doctor because, didn't know if that was a stroke or it was whatever it was. Went to my doctor and my doctor said to me, "Oh, it sounds like you've had a panic attack.
And
Can
can
you?"
I give you a prescription for your panic attack?
Right?
Offer you that next?
Absolutely. That's exactly what she did. And so here are a couple of medicines that you can take that will help you with your panic attacks. And my brain right away was like, "A panic attack? What? I've never even heard of that word in my entire life."
Mm.
And this is very interesting, and I find this is so interesting. If I look at that point, that moment in my life, and Spirit is saying the pivotal point, prior to that, I can honestly say that I never, ever experienced the feeling of anxiety. Isn't that
Wow.
weird?
No. Well, I don't think it's weird. I think it's a blessing.
Yeah. Right? But then all of a sudden for it to
But
like, I
now
mean,
you're making up for it on the back end
I
of
know.
life.
So was I suppressing it
I
all of
don't
the
know.
like, honestly, like, I had been on
Mm.
planes, I had gone on trips, I had been in third world countries, I had, like, you name it, I had done stuff and never had any anxiety about it. Never
Right.
had it at all. From that moment forward, I was filled with anxiety, like, just filled with it. I had
Wow.
and that particular experience never, ever replicated itself. Thank God.
Right. Thankfully.
But it never ever happened again, but I spent years, and I'm not even kidding you, years having PTSD around that moment in anticipation that that would
Of it
happen
happening
again.
again. Hmm.
And you talk about the power of the mind, right?
Yeah.
Because that was
It hooked
my body
itself
had let
into
go of
that
it,
story, and it will then, it's almost like a virus that runs
right?
through our brain. Like I think of anxiety
Parasite.
and yeah, I do. I think of anxiety and those repetitive thoughts that we have, and we all
Hmm.
have them. I
Hmm.
think of it as a virus. I think of it as a virus that we feed with the way we live our lives and the way we're not
Right.
true to ourselves and the way that we push so hard. But it sounds to me like your experience would have been what I guess could have been called like a Kundalini awakening,
Right.
right? And we'll go into that, I'm sure, at
Hmm.
some point. But that Kundalini awakening then would have almost, I think they're showing me, brought like your light body like fully online. And then for you to be that crystallized vibration of yourself, all that density has to go, right?
Hmm.
The traumas from childhood, the heartaches from whatever you were going through at the time. I kind of know a little bit about the marriage. There's still density in those emotions that
Right.
when we come online like that, I feel they got to go somewhere. And anxiety is a pretty strong energy.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting how such a powerful awakening moment happened at like one of my lowest
Yeah.
vibrational times, right? Like you would think, and I think this is what people actually think, is that like when you have your awakening, it's because you've been doing all the great things. You were like reading the books and meditating and praying and
No.
doing all that. But for me, and maybe you guys can let us know, certainly leave comments for our stuff. It happened for me when I was like the lowest vibrational,
Absolutely. Me too. Yeah.
right? Like I don't even think I was like being a particularly good friend at the time to people.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like I was just not, I was feeling so shitty about myself that that's kind of like was my whole entire experience.
But if it had happened at a time where you were feeling fantastic about life, then your healing journey, right? And
Mhm.
all of the things that you have experienced, because gosh, you've got so many experiences along the way healing, um, those wouldn't have happened. You would have just been like, woo, I have a great life, and woohoo, I have all these
Right.
cool new gifts too, right? But
Right. Right.
you
Right.
you got those gifts at a time where you needed to use them to heal yourself.
Right. It creates the
So,
depth, right? Like
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
yeah, for sure. And I know Leah and I talked about this. We were saying, the guests that we want to have on our podcast will be the ones who are raw and real and have had real
Mhm.
experiences. We don't I don't personally don't want a guide or a teacher that has had it easy their entire lives because what are you going to teach me?
Yeah, and also how are you going to hold space for people when when they're showing some really difficult parts of their healing
Right.
when you've never experienced it yourself? You're going to either spiritually bypass that experience,
Mhm.
which is so damaging for people and when you're
Right.
trying to heal,
Right.
because then you feel like there's something wrong with you because you are having these harder emotions and your guide is telling you, well, just do this and just do that, right?
Right. 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 Just
So
meditate more and
just
say 10 Hail Marys.
whatever it is they're pushing in the moment, right?
Right, right.
Where was I going with this, Jody? I just completely went off topic with this. No,
Yeah,
anyway,
so, I mean, it creates the spiritual depth for us, and also
yeah.
feel like when you talk about you would have lack of compassion, I believe that compassion, the frequency of compassion is generated, right? We
Hmm.
generate it. And that's another, when we talk about purpose of being an empath or a light worker is that we hold space. Leah's saying that lots. And when we hold space, we hold it with a specific frequency. And, Spirit's shown us, especially over this last year, that compassion is one of the most powerful frequencies that we can hold space for.
Well, it's the
Right,
most healing for
right,
sure,
right,
right?
right.
So when you think of your darkest time, the one you just talked to us about, had you had somebody stand in front of you and say, oh my goodness, this must have been so scary for you.
Right.
And, let's sit down and let me tell me about this. And,
Right.
and how is it, could I do this for you? How is it that I could help you through this? And
Yeah, let's
can I
unpack
take you
it.
to an appointment? And
Right.
how did you feel that that appointment went? Like,
Right.
having
Right.
somebody to hold that kind of space
Right.
would have been a different level of anxiety afterwards. Do you understand what I'm
Absolutely.
saying?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but instead it was like, you go see the doctor because you trust the doctors.
Right.
And she was like, I guess there was a part of me that was like, well, I shouldn't be worried about this because she doesn't seem worried about it.
Hmm.
And she gave me the 2 magical pills, to that I could take if it happened so that I could stop it from happening, which, by the way, I, only took them for a little while because they made me feel really strange.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, if she would have been like, if I, if it would have been, and here's the thing, how many times when we have these experiences do we go, well, if I would have done this instead,
Hmm.
if that would have been, that kind of defeats the purpose of understanding that all of these things happen in divine timing for a purpose.
For that depth, right? That you were just
Exactly.
talking about.
And you can't take it out of sequence either. You can't
Mm-mm.
be like, "Oh, well, why didn't I just do that first? Why did I have to," right?
Right.
It
Because
has to happen.
everything, and if you believe that everything has been pre-planned by us before we came here, to an extent, I do have some, of my own reservations around that as a blanket theory, and we'll talk about that one day. But for
Mhm.
the most part, we choose things, right, to get the
Yeah.
lessons for our
I think
journey.
we have soul missions for sure. So there's a
Absolutely.
general theme that we have, like, to work
Yes.
on for sure.
And so but now that, because you didn't have somebody to hold that kind of space for you, and
Mhm.
you understand that people need that when they have traumatic and scary experiences, you now
Mhm.
offer that when you're doing your work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and also, again, we learn to do this stuff so that we can help ourselves.
First.
And that was, I'm telling you, it took me years and years and years and years and years still learning that we have to bring that, that compassion, that holding that space for ourselves first,
Oh, you can't heal without that first.
right?
Yeah.
Which is, as somebody who's empathic, it's always, we're always like, here, extending ourselves. Here, you have a problem. Here, let me fix your problem. Oh, even if I have the same problem as you, don't worry, I'm going to help you fix your problem before I fix my
Mhm.
problem.
Mhm. Well, but that's when you have to really know yourself super well and say, am I fixing that problem because I don't want to be looking at my problem?
Right,
Right?
right. And that's
But
that
we do
learning
that.
again. Everything you feel, every single thing that you feel is valid.
Absolutely.
And that we don't have to suppress it. We're not meant to like, oh, well, don't worry about that. Just carry on, go on to the next thing. Because that obviously was an event that was, very, important, significant, right?
Hmm.
And it's funny because, I see clients do readings and there's things that will happen in their lifetimes, like an accident, like and I know there's no such thing as an accident, but an accident will happen and, we'll say to them, spirit will say, well, do you remember around the accident, is that when this physical thing started showing up for you? And they'll be like, yeah, actually it
Hmm.
did. I never thought about those two things. And we can clearly see that, like, this person just had this life transforming accident, but they didn't let themselves, like, sit in it or wonder about it or, like, grow through it or heal through it. They just moved
Process.
on.
Yeah, we don't give ourselves any ease or grace to process
Right.
things.
Exactly.
And we don't have people that teach us how to process things. Our
Right.
parents, I mean, we have a listener out there that had parents that sat them down and taught them how to process emotions and how to communicate needs effectively and how to hold space for other people, I would love to hear from you and meet your
Right.
parents.
Right.
Because the most of us, we never got taught any of that, right?
No. No.
So
Just
part
carry
of,
on. Keep going.
yeah, and that's why when we carry on and carry on and carry on, we end up crashing because we then
Mhm.
have this warehouse of unprocessed emotional and mental energy that's been sitting in our physical body for so,
Right.
so long.
Yeah. The
Yeah,
energetic buildup, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And
And so
if
if you
you're,
think back kind of like through your moments of awakening, what would be like if you kind of traveled back in time, what would be like the first significant, and maybe now you have a better understanding of like, okay, well, that was like something that I kind of didn't really look at, but now I can see again the connection of
oh,
everything, right?
my whole life was that, Jody.
Yeah.
My entire life were moments in time that I had never processed. That was my whole life.
Right.
And so when the body finally said, okay, we've had enough in 2019, that's been my whole journey, has been taking each and every one of those moments and processing them, and
Right.
then releasing them from my physical, emotional, and mental body. And it's not just one, it's all of them, right? It's all of those things.
Right.
But for me, I didn't awaken. And I guess it depends on what you call awakening. So I
Right.
guess
Right.
awakening is the understanding that there is more to life than what we see. I don't
And what
really
meets the eye. Yeah, for
what
sure.
meets the eye, right? And so I've always been, I guess, awake.
Hmm.
Um, in that sense, when I was little, I saw spirit, I felt spirit, I heard my own guides. I didn't know what they were, all
Right.
that stuff. But some really awful and scary things also were happening at that time. So all of that shut down, right? As soon as you talk
Right.
about anxiety for me cuts my connection
Right.
immediately, like
Right.
immediately. Um, so my awakening would have happened in 2017. Um, and it was after a really, really, really difficult breakup.
Right.
Um, and for me, it wasn't even about the breakup now, looking back, right? It was about all these unhealed wounds from childhood
Right.
that were
Right.
being triggered at the time. And in those moments of trying to deal with that, of the breakup, I started using things like meditation, right? And I started using those kinds of para holistic, para healthcare kinds of remedies. But I also went to see psychics, and I also went to see mediums because I'd always seen them in my whole life.
Right. Right.
And in those moments, I was always told that I had abilities, and I denied it. I'm like, I did not. What are you talking about? I have nothing.
Right.
And then in 2017, I started to actually hear my guides. They started to give me sort of information that turned out to be true, that really, really helped me move forward. Um, but like you, I didn't really process much at that point. I
Mhm.
just dealt with the breakup, went back to work, like no, went to, was working, was being a mom, was doing this, was doing that, and then didn't heal any of it, none of it. Just put band-aids on everything, right? And
Right.
like
Right.
you, I was drinking a bottle of white wine, not like you, Lila, you had that much, but I literally would pick up a bottle of white wine on the way home from work on a Friday. And I'd pick up a bottle of white wine for me and a pizza for the kids. And that was every Friday. And they'd have the pizza and I would drink my wine. And that's coping, right? You coped. I
Hmm.
was on antidepressants at a
Right.
high, high, high dose. I was on sleeping pills because I wasn't sleeping. Like I hadn't been
Right.
sleeping properly in like 10 years, I think.
Wow.
I was on, at that time, birth control medication, right? So when you
Right.
talk about like a pharmaceutical mess,
Nice
right? I was
chemical
a
mix. Yeah.
pharmaceutical mess. Yeah, chemical mix.
Yeah.
So I kind of understood that I had this ability and I could heal, and they were telling me things, but I decided to make the decision to go, I just want to live my 3D life. I'm just going to go back to work
Right. Right.
and just focus on that. And then in 2019, I got really sick, really,
Right.
really sick. And that's that whole, my knees and my and my tears hit the floor at the same time because I got really sick to the point where I wasn't getting out of bed. My poor kids at the time were having to come upstairs and like wrap my feet in heating blankets and things. Just like
Mm.
I couldn't wash my own hair. I was just so sick. And I had
Right.
come from being a single mom, running a school, My kids were like exceptional because, I was super mom, and like all these things that I was expecting of myself, right? Taking
Right.
care of my mom, making sure the house was perfect, going to taking courses, doing extra for the board. Like I was just being in a relationship, trying to be the best girlfriend ever, like just pushing, pushing, pushing.
Right.
And when my body broke, all of that fell away. Like you hear this, right? Like you
Hmm.
have to be stripped of all of your earthly identity when
Right.
you go through this process, the dark night of the soul process, right?
Right.
So here I am, I'm sick. I can't get out of bed.
Right.
I can't work in a career that I've spent my whole life building, like 20 years building this
Hmm.
career, which then gave me all of this financial fear because I was a single mom, right, with two
Right.
kids
Right.
heading towards university.
Yeah.
Um, because of the fibromyalgia diagnosis and because I had such great doctors, I was in therapy and I had started uncovering some trauma at the same time. So my relationship with my family was now shifting,
Right.
and I was having to let go of people in that way.
Right.
And then my relationship, the person that I had been with for 5 years and I was deeply in love with, walked out.
Wow. That's great
So,
timing, right?
right? And so that's all of it, right? Relationship gone, career gone, health gone, family, or what I believed to be my family story was gone, right?
Right. Right.
Who do you turn to? You turn to God.
Exactly. Right. You have no other choice to be like, is there anybody else out there that can help me?
No, there wasn't. And in the
Right.
past, I would have gone back to old coping mechanisms, whatever those would have been. But because my health was so bad, I couldn't even do that, right?
Right. Right.
And I see it now as a blessing. Like, oh my gosh, that's your blessing, because I probably would have. Because I did actually. I worked my butt off for 2 years to get healthy enough to
Hmm.
go back to work. That was all I wanted to
To
do.
just jump right back into the whole thing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I was taking classes with you, and I was very much aware of my abilities, and I was very in tune with spirit, and but my purpose, my identity was I needed to get back to work. I needed to be that person again. And I
Right.
did. And I did. I went back to work, and 6 months, and I crashed again.
Again.
And I listened this time. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I mean I think most people do that because it's like that comfortableness of the old version of who we are, right? And I know
Hmm.
there's also like, there's tons of psychological reasons, the whole brain chemistry of how, we create these neural pathways through experiences of trauma. Like we literally like change the brain synapses. Like so it's not just make believe. We
No,
actually and we become addicted to that experience as well, right? We become addicted to the trauma and the drama and that feels like home to us.
absolutely. And it's why we end up in relationships and friendships, um, that aren't equal, that aren't as giving and as loving both ways, right?
Right. Right.
Because of all of the things we've talked about so far in this last hour and 10 minutes. So, like we said at the beginning, you have to know yourself. You have to know all these multidimensional facets of yourself, while you're healing.
Yeah. And not only that, you have to be okay with who I was yesterday is going to be very different for who I
Yeah,
am today. That
that's a hard
that
journey.
always is going to be changing and that's the purpose of it, right? That's if I one thing I learn about how energy works is that we always want it to be moving and flowing and
Mm,
changing. We don't want things, and it's funny because we kind of some of us, especially who are empaths, because we come from instability, most of us,
yes.
we like crave that sameness,
Safety and security.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like even if I know that it's not good for me, and even
Yep.
if I know that it's not, my soul is not awakening, I'm gonna go back to that because it's easier.
Yeah. And I think that that's a very important part of what we should be talking about, because the awakening, ascension, healing journey is not this beautiful, straight, like upward line.
Right.
It is so like, it's not linear at all. You
Mm-hmm.
are constantly fighting your ego, your triggers, your pain body, your programming, your all of that, so that you can heal enough to find out who it is that you truly want and are supposed to be.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
And so if we don't talk about things like, I was really depressed. I was on medication. I
Right.
used to drink. I used it as a coping. Like, we don't,
Right.
listen, this story for me wasn't 12 or 10 or 20 years ago. I started my day with a coffee and a cigarette 5 years ago.
Right. Right.
Right? It hasn't been all that long. That picking up a bottle of wine on a Friday night and finishing the whole thing, in 2 days, that was 5 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's a constant back and forth.
Well,
But
thankfully, Spirit always says there's no such thing as time or space. So,
yeah.
so
So
whether
I
it
just
was
want
10
people
years ago
to
or 5 years
know.
ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I want people to know that it's messy, but it's also
Right.
so beautiful. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And it's not easy. It's
Mm-mm.
uncomfortable and it's scary. And you will have moments where you feel completely alone. And this was, the hardest part of my healing journey, my awakening, my ascension, whatever you want to call it, my dark night of the soul, my Kundalini awakening happened 2 years ago. So two
Wow.
years ago, while I was already, being the guide, being the teacher, being the holistic having patients,
Mm.
seeing clients, it happened in the middle of my life.
Right? And you had to shut all that down,
Yeah.
right?
Like it was, and I mean, I understand it was an accumulation of all of these little events, but it was always, again, me popping back up out of the event and being like, okay, that was nothing to worry about. Just keep on keeping on.
Just, yep, we're just gonna exactly keep on but that is also for you and I, part of the way we were brought up, right? Because
Right.
we both came from a very, like, mother daughter, that was it in the household.
Hmm.
And either we were parenting our parents or
Right.
taking care of ourselves, so there
Right.
wasn't a lot of getting that nurturing back all the
Not a
time.
lot of downtime, right?
No, no,
No.
so we would never have known that that's what we should have been doing for
Right.
ourselves.
Yeah. And nobody
uh,
gave us the and it's interesting because I know for myself, even though, I'm married 22 years now, I love my husband, he's wonderful. I can say he's my soulmate. But, when we met, he came with his own stuff, right? Like
mhm.
he comes with, and his stuff really mirrored a lot of the stuff that I'd had in other relationships, including the relationship with my mom.
Yeah, well,
So,
that's
right? And so it
mhm.
doesn't, even when you are doing all of this work, these, and Spirit's just saying opportunities. Yes, thank the word, they're opportunities. We get these opportunities that come for more growth, more potential, and it never ever ends. Like it
No,
does not end.
we were saying it's so some people say it's like an onion, right? Layer after layer. I have a
Right.
beautiful friend, hi Debbie Joe, Centered Healers,
Mhm.
that talks about the lotus flower, that with every new thing that you uncover, it's another petal of your lotus flower opening. And I really
Right.
like
Right.
that analogy versus the onion, right?
Right. Right.
Um, but it never ends. And it's
Yeah.
not, I don't think there is no box that we can check, oh, healed, right?
Right.
But I
Right.
do feel like, and I know that this is coming in so many of my client readings and so many of the people that have come in for, some of the inner child healing that I do. A lot of our romantic relationships, until we are on our healing journey, mirror our relationship with our parents. It's
Right.
in,
Yes.
in all the time when it comes in very clearly and we don't see it.
Right.
You often need somebody on the outside to say, yes,
Oh, right.
but.
'Cause we're too close to. That's one of the other 2 things, and I would like to, like, put this disclaimer out for anybody who doesn't understand it, but just because you have been given the gifts of being a psychic or a medium or intuitive or what do you wanna call yourself, it does not mean that we just automatically understand everything about
Oh gosh,
ourselves
no.
at 100%, or that we, like, have the ability or the capability to look ourselves in the face and be like, "That's what you're doing." It just right? Spirit's always shown me this. It's like if you put a mirror so close to your face, you can't really see much, right?
Mhm,
And when we're
mhm.
trying to, fix our own stuff, that's really kind of how it is. That's the lens of it. It's so close in your face. That's why it makes it so hard, right? To do things because if I'm reading for you, Leah, or reading for a client, there's like this massive space between us.
Right.
And it's
Yes.
that space where spirit comes in and then interprets and we do that whole energetic reading of things, but when it's my stuff, it's in my face.
Mhm, mhm. You
And
can't see
it's
it.
hard to see for sure.
No, and that's why I always say, like, every good psychic needs their own psychic, right?
Right?
You do. Every good energy healer needs their own energy healer. We aren't perfect.
Right.
And for me, I won't practice anything that I like. I will people know who know me in my personal life know that I try to be very, very authentic. Like, I will not,
Right.
I try to say and do and be and just all in the same vibration. And so
Mhm.
I need I need help sometimes, right?
Right.
And
Yeah,
we all do.
absolutely.
We all need help sometimes. I come to
Absolutely.
you when things are like really muddy. I come to you. I book an appointment just like everybody else because even though I have my team constantly chattering to me,
Right.
like we said earlier, when your vibration starts to lower because you're
Yes.
worrying and you're feeling bad, that's not a purely clear connection anymore.
Exactly. And and whenever your mind gets involved with it, that's where everything just completely becomes cloudy and complicated and chaotic for sure.
I think that we have so much to talk about going forward because
Absolutely.
um healing is like the I'm just being shown like there's so many different spirals and we all have to take like little quanta from each of those and build our own healing spiral, right? Because
Mhm.
my way is not your way,
Right.
but something in your way I will resonate with, or I might resonate with, and I'll take it. I think that for me and for a lot of people, you have to have a really personal journey with yourself to know what's really
Absolutely.
working for you.
Yeah, the self-discovery for sure. So that's why
Mhm.
when we bring on, our future guests, I'm excited. I'm excited too because I'm like I am an energy junkie.
Yeah.
I love other people's stories, right? I
Mhm.
love learning about their experiences, especially when they're authentic and real. And I feel like that will be so healing for all of us. So if you're listening to the podcast, do yourself a favor and just show up, without any wants or needs, and just trust that, your spirit team will make things stand out for you, right? Like,
Absolutely.
yeah. And with those things that we share when we, tell our stories, when we become storytellers with each other, it brings us out of the spiritual closet of, you don't have to look perfect and you don't have to be perfect to be on your ascension, on your awakening journey, because you don't nobody wants you to be polished and pretty for this because it's not it's not that kind of experience.
No, there are days where I show up like my hair isn't like who cares? Like just show up. I
Right.
remember going through those dark, dark times and you saying to me for classes or whatnot, you know what? Just show up. You don't have to come on
Mhm.
camera. Just show up. I
Right.
promise spirit will get what you need out of it. And it's very true.
Right.
Podcasts and you get what you need. Just show up and see what steps out for you. And our next
Absolutely.
person, so do you want to tease a little bit for October 30th? We have well, October 30th, we're going to post on this November 1st.
Right.
We have Casey Scott.
Yes, Casey Scott. So he's a really interesting person, and he was one of the healers that I went to go and see when I was, really, really struggling a couple of years ago. He is, I'm not going to talk about his story lots because we'll have him come in and do it, but he's learned so much, he's grown so much, and even it's interesting because even in the time from when I started watching him and listening to him, I could see his like journey unfolding, right? And he's still and now he's like, continuing, and it's interesting because as we overcome a hurdle, yes, another hurdle comes.
Oh boy, do they ever.
But maybe that next hurdle is like, it'll be a different experience. So yeah, I'm excited to have him. He's very genuine and raw and real, and
Yes.
yeah, it'll be good.
I can't wait because that's what I want us to be. Well, like we said, it's not a pretty experience all the time. Let's be raw. Let's be real.
Yeah, and I think, if we go back to that, just to kind of wrap things up about the whole having fear around things, having the recognizing that you have that fear vibration within you, that resonance, to understand that whatever it is that you are going through right now, whatever, if it's with your Kundalini awakening, your dark night of the soul, whatever you want to call it, it has fear in it,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what's generating, that's what's creating it. And so having less fear about the fear will help tremendously, right? That's And I think that every time we show up for these podcasts, every conversation we have, when we are kind of like dispelling the myths of, oh yes, you have to be really afraid and you have to do
Mm-hmm.
this, and if you don't do that, right. We're going to talk about that, to say that it's Spirit's just saying it's not a one size fits all.
Gosh, no, no.
So don't be like, I love the story of Leah's, with her therapist showing up and being her earth angel and all that. I didn't have that experience for
Yeah.
me. And that's okay. So if you're somebody who has been trying your hardest and trying to do your best and things just are not showing up for you yet, don't worry. The keyword is yet,
Oh
yet,
gosh, yet
right?
for listen, I'm 51. And I didn't start this journey didn't start for me and with finding the right people because I was listening to my team until I was 48. So
Right.
those first 48 years was a lot of in the dark, and I'm
Right.
still in the dark. Like I still have those seed moments, as I call it, like in the dirt, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't want us to hide those moments anymore because those are
No.
just as important. And listen, raw and real, putting this podcast out has the anxiety for me has been through the roof. Oh my God, I'm going to be seen. I'm going to be heard. What is this? What? And so I've got these little inner child parts that are like so afraid. And you
Right?
know what? We're working through it.
Yeah.
And
That's
so just
beautiful.
show up and we're going to work through it. Right.
That's beautiful. That's awesome. Awesome. So we remind you guys to please, if you liked what we said, if you didn't like what we said, leave us comments. If you watch it on YouTube, you can leave us comments and we will
Mhm.
read the comments. And you can give us reviews on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. Check out Leah's socials, her Cosmic Heart Intuitive Services. She's on Facebook and Instagram. And you guys can find me on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube.
Mhm.
And we look forward to talking to you guys next week. So every Friday, we're going to be launching the video. And next week, we do have a big guest. We will start to give you guys teasers towards that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm
Looking forward
excited. I
to,
was looking at his Instagram today. I'm like,
yeah.
ooh,
Yeah.
because I don't know I know one of them, but I don't know your guest. So I'm going to be learning along with everybody else. It's going to be,
That's exciting. I'm excited about
yeah,
that too. So that I get to, you know some of Leah's people that she's followed or that she's gone to or that she thinks are very interesting, and vice versa. So trust that when we're doing this, we may be like the ones behind the microphones and doing the things, but we are showing up like students, just like everybody else.
absolutely. Fear, anxiety, and all. Yeah, we're showing
And
up just
all.
like
We're
everybody
bringing
else.
it all.
Yeah. All right. Thank you
Okay,
so much to
everybody.
everybody. Yes.
Thank you. Blessings to you guys all. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Much love, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
As we wrap up this episode, we want to extend a heartfelt thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in. Your support means the world to us, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. So if you enjoyed today's discussion, please take a moment to leave us a review or comment on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but it also helps others to discover the show. Don't forget to share the podcast with your friends and your family who might enjoy it too. And mark your calendars because next Friday, we have a special treat for you. We'll be joined by an incredible guest whose insights you won't want to miss. Stay tuned, and until then, take care and keep listening.